All right, good night, everyone. Good night, good night. As usual, I'm not coming to you as a politician. I'm not coming to you as a teacher. I'm not coming to you as someone with a title. I'm coming to you just as an ordinary citizen asking what some might say is an uncomfortable question. So, before we get into the meat of the matter, there has been a lot of talks that education is not preparing our youths and people in general for the real world. So we're going to have a look at that in relation to St. Vincent and the Grenadines because this will vary depending on the island that you are from. So we are speaking in relation to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So the question is our education system in St. Vincent and the Grenadines really preparing the majority of young people for real life? You can let me know in the comments. You can say whether yes or no if you think that our current education system in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is really and truly preparing our youths for the real world. And if not, what exactly is it preparing them for? So let's talk let's talk honestly tonight. So in terms of you can let me know by giving a thumbs up if you're hearing me clearly. Nevertheless, okay, let's get into the meat of the matter tonight. We have to look at the education revolution and what exactly did it actually produce. As we all might be aware, and for those of you who are not, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we heard a lot about the education revolution, and we are still hearing the word today. That simply means that access was expanded. More students entered secondary schools. More students got opportunities, and that part is good. But here is the hard question. If a student is failing year after year, struggling academically, not mastering the core subjects, yet they are still being promoted to the next class, what are we actually building? Are we building confidence or are we actually building confusion? So we must ask another question. Are we really empowering the students or are we quietly lowering the standards to avoid hard conversations like this? The student fails year after year academically, but yet that student is still being promoted to the next and the next and the next class. So those are questions that we must ask ourselves because here is the reality. The reality of that is if you leave school unable to read properly, calculate properly, or think critically, the world does not promote you the way the school system might. The bank will definitely not promote you. Technology is not going to slow down for those persons. And life in general does not have automatic advancement. So it's something that we have to think about, and it's something that we definitely have to consider. So let's look at the quality of subjects versus the quality of skills, for example, because in most Caribbean islands, and I have to mention this, every student knows that as you enter secondary school, you are suddenly doing a number of subjects. I will name out a few. Form 1. I don't know what you might call Form 1 in the country where you are watching me from, but um, you pass the CPEA, you enter Form 1, you are doing subjects such as mathematics, English, language, English literature, history, geography, Spanish, IT, social studies, religious education, physical education, and some would even start with biology, chemistry, physics. Sometimes that's about 10, 12, or 14 subjects that students are loaded with as they enter Form 1. And what happens is that many of the students are drowning. Now, let me ask you something. How many of those subjects actually teach a young person how to start a small business, how to manage money, how to invest, how to grow food, how to repair something, how to survive without depending on a salary? Because that's almost like pretty much stuffing stuffing their heads with information, but starving them of hand skills, if you know what I mean. And when school ends, many young people cannot monetize a single thing that they would have learned. And that particularly is very, very dangerous. Another thing that we have to look at is artificial intelligence. We all hear about AI, and that's another layer because artificial intelligence is replacing customer service jobs, clerical work, data entry, basic accounting, even some legal and medical support tasks. Computers are grading papers, robots are stocking shelves, softwares are actually writing reports, yet in many classrooms in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are still teaching for an economy that is slowly disappearing. We are actually still training many of the students for office jobs, and many of those office jobs might not even exist in the next 10 years. 10 years is a lot, but the thing about it is that we are not training them for adaptability. We are not training them to create value independently. And that gap is very dangerous. So those are things that we have to consider when when we're looking at education. So again, I ask, is our current system in St. Vincent and the Grenadines really preparing the children for the real world? And what I'm sharing tonight is just to stir up your mind. You can let me know how you feel about this, because all of what I've mentioned, it's creating something called a dependency syndrome. And we have to look at where it actually started. Now, I'm going to tread on this very carefully. If a system produces graduates who cannot independently generate income, who do not have practical skills, who are not financially literate, what happens? What happens is that they're going to look to the government for jobs, for contracts, for assistance, for programs, for rescue, and slowly dependency becomes culture. Look around St. Vincent and the Grenadines and honestly sit and think about what I have just said. Slowly, all of those things, dependency becomes culture. Everyone looking to the government to do this and to do that. Now, listen, I'm not blaming I'm not blaming any individual. I'm not blaming anybody because at the end of the day, if you are never taught how money works, if you are never taught how ownership works, if you are never taught about wealth building, how you can build it. So if you're never taught it, people will cling to whatever political party promises opportunity. And when that happens, politics becomes survival. If you look around and be honest, that is not a healthy democracy. That is economic desperation. All right. Let's see. I have a comment here from Michael. Let's have a look. All right, that's an interesting thing that you would have written there, because indeed, in the world that we are currently living in, a lot of persons really do not know how to survive. And when you look around most economies, even in the present economy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it it's really economic desperation at this point. So we have to look at financial illiteracy and the consequences of it. So that is something very serious and we have to talk about it. There there was a case there was a case where a young man reportedly took around 1,000 EC dollars to take someone else's life. You heard what I just said? 1,000 EC dollars. That is that is not even 500 US dollars to take someone else's life. Pause there for a moment. Pause there for a moment and think about that. $1,000 is not generational wealth. It is not even business capital. $1,000 is not long term security. $1,000 is desperation money. Now, look, I am not excusing crime because we shouldn't, but I am asking if young people understood money, if they understood compounding, if they understood business, if they understood agriculture, if they understood digital income streams, don't you think that some of them would choose differently? If that young man knew how to make $1,000 legally in a week, do you think that he would risk prison for it? That's just that's just thinking, you know? And financial ignorance is very dangerous. It usually would make short-term decisions look very, very attractive. And there is that economic reality and crime factor that we must look at. We A lot of us are usually asking, why is crime increasing? But do we do we take the opportunity and ask, are we equipping our youths with survival tools? If you graduate 200 students and 150 of them have no marketable skill, where do they go? If they can't find stable employment, if wages are low, if opportunities are limited, some will hustle legally, some will migrate, some will sit idle, and yes, some are naturally gonna drift into crime. Education that does not connect to economic reality, it is certainly going to create vulnerability. And vulnerable minds are very easily influenced. So it leaves us to ask the question, are we preparing workers or builders? Are, we have to look at this question. Are we raising entrepreneurs or are we raising job seekers or job creators, if you want to call it that? If the system's highest praise is to tell you, get a government job, then what happens when the government cannot hire anyone? What happens when AI reducing staffing needs? And when I say AI, remember, I mean artificial intelligence. What happens when budget tighten? The system is gonna collapse under its own dependency. One thing that has been devalued and looked at as backwards in our economy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is are things like agriculture, trades, and skills. I don't know what happened along the line, but they have been totally devalued somewhere along the way. Practical skills were treated as inferior, and those things are done by design to keep one set up and one set down. We have to look at things like carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, farming, mechanics, you know, those kinds those kinds of skills are actually recession proof, because you can fix something anywhere, you can grow food anywhere, and yes, you can grow food practically anywhere, even in containers. You can you can build anywhere, but culturally, many people are told, if you don't pass exams, you failed. No, if you don't have a skill that feeds you, that is the real failure. So we need to ask the question, so what should education look like? Imagine this. By age 16, if by that age, I want to think that by age 16, every student must know how to budget. Every student must understand interest rates. Every student should understand taxes. They should be growing something. They should be fixing something. They should sell something. Imagine if every student leaves school with a small business project completed, a trade certification, financial literacy training. Now we are preparing for reality, not just exams. And as I would have mentioned earlier, this is not an attack. It's not an attack on anybody. And I'm not blaming anybody, but it's a call for evolution. Let me be clear. So I'm not attacking teachers, I'm not attacking leadership. It's about evolving. The world, the world changed and it continues to change rapidly. The economy is changing, technology is advancing at a super rapid rate. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, are school curriculums changing fast enough to meet up with the reality? I mean, I want to think that that is quite a valid question. So let me ask you directly, did school teach you how to survive financially? You can let me know, yes or no. Did school prepare you for real adult life? Or did you have to learn everything the hard way? You can comment and let me know, honestly, because the hard truth is that education access has indeed expanded, but access without real outcomes is not quite enough. You know, if young people graduate without skills, without financial understanding, without adaptability, then we're just setting them up to struggle. And struggling youths are vulnerable youths, that affect crimes, that affect politics, that affects dependency, that affects the future of a nation. So the question really, it's not did we expand education? The question is, did we expand opportunity? Because real education should do three things. It have to build character, it has to build competence, and it also must build the capacity for individuals to survive independently without having without developing that dependency syndrome where you look to the government for everything. So if education doesn't do those three things that I mentioned, build character, build competence, and build capacity for the youths to survive independently. If it doesn't do that, then I'm of the opinion that it needs reform. And it's not blame, reform. So tonight, those are just questions from an ordinary citizens. I'm not tearing down anyone. I thank you all again for joining me on this live. Let me know what you think. That's just my perspective. You can share yours in the comments below. Do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We'll definitely catch you another time. Good night.